Our next speaker is Victor Garber. Victor Garber started his acting career as a folk singer. He's had a long career in entertainment. He began his career folk singer with a Canadian group called the Sugar Shop. I thought that was very appropriate, Sugar Shop. And he's been on the Ed Sullivan Show. He has a long career on Broadway, including Godspell. And he starred in the movie Godspell. I was stagecraft in high school with Godspell. And over the years, he's performed in dozens of TV shows and movies, including Sleepless in Seattle, Titanic, Argo, Alias. But what you should really remember him mostly for is his diabetes advocacy. He raises money for different causes with diabetes, from the JDRF in Canada, Beyond Type 1, raising money for research. And he's also testified to Congress about this crazy pricing of insulin, gone from $35 a bottle to $200 a bottle. And so it is fantastic that he's gone to Congress to talk about that. So I'd like to welcome Victor Garber.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay,
yes, I can.
That's a miracle. It's a miracle, because I'm so bad at all this. But I'm very happy to be here and happy to see you in person.
Oh, thank you so much. So anyway, I just want to ask you some stuff in the beginning. So when were you diagnosed type 1?
I was a little before 12. I was I was 11, but later, but closer to 12. That's what I remember. Anyway, it was. I feel like I've always been diabetic, but I realized there was a time before that.
Right. When you were diagnosed at that age, how did that affect your parents in your family life?
It was traumatic. I mean, the only diabetic in our family was a distant cousin. So I mean, I had seen her give herself shots, and was sort of fascinated by the whole process. But we didn't really know much about it, and I was overweight, and I was sort of, but we don't know. I mean, we couldn't trace it, so that alone was baffling. And then just obviously what was available to us in those days, as you understand, because you know what testing urine was and boiling needles was, and all of that. I mean, it was just it just feels prehistoric now, given as you're talking. I mean, I have all the accoutrement now. I've got the Riley link, I've got the Dexcom, I've got the Omnipod, and it's a day does not go by that I am not grateful for all of these things, because it's made life much easier.
I also want to ask you about Children's Summer Camp for Diabetes. As you heard earlier, Dr. Earl Hirsch was my camp counselor. And last year in 1974, and he was part of my early education. From what I experienced as a child diabetic, summer camp was the best education I ever got as a type 1 diabetic, because my family and I were scared. And then once we got to camp with 200 other kids, it was like, wow, I'm not the only one. This isn't so bad after all. Plus, Earl and all the counselors there, it was like boot camp. We were running up and down hills, doing dietary education, and it was just amazing. And I am so glad it's continuing today. Last year, Diabetes Education Camping Association Director Terry Ackley spoke about what they're doing. And I just can't emphasize diabetic summer camps enough. Lions have been involved with that. I just want to get your opinion on your experience with summer camps.
Well, I fought it tooth and nail because I didn't want to go, but we were living in London, Ontario, and there was in Ottawa was, I think, the only camp certainly within range, that I knew about, or that my mother and father forced me to go. And I've never been more grateful for I was just scared. I was just timid and frightened, and I wouldn't be able to do what the other kids were doing. And it was life changing, as you say, because you don't feel alone. You're in a community of people who are experiencing, of young people who are experiencing exactly so you feel kind of invincible by the end of it. You feel like, oh, I can do this. Other people are doing it. I can do it too. And that's, we all have to feel like we share something. And that was a very important part of my life for me.
So you boiled your syringes and glass syringes when you were younger?
Well, my mother did, and then yes, but I learned how to do that. And yeah, I mean, it's so weird. I can't remember when it all changed, but I remember, I remember a finger pricking came much later because it was
1980. I think it was around 1980.
Yeah, so that was much later, and testing urine, was just loathsome.
Yeah.
But all those things were, that's what you had to do.
10 drops of water, 2 drops of urine in a Clinitest kit. Remember?
Yes, and then to find out years later that it was useless.
Oh my gosh, Victor. So what I found out, if your blood sugar was your urine sugar was negative, all that meant was your actual blood sugar was 200 or lower. Now, 200 or lower, what kind of control is that? Now we know if our blood sugar is 101, 102, or 450. So the technology has really changed. And so I work for Tandem Diabetes, the Tandem insulin pump. And one of our patients, she was without her pump for a couple of days. She had to get a new pump, and she had temporarily take insulin injections. And she was devastated. She goes, I got to do what? I got to take shots?
Yeah.
I go, these kids are so spoiled today.
Yeah. Listen, I know that I use the Riley link, which is not FDA approved, as you probably know. And I didn't realize that it expired after a year. One day it just stopped. Mm-hmm. And I was working in Vancouver doing a series, and it just didn't work. And I can't think of his name offhand, but a friend of mine contacted somebody that was in Vancouver, and who was a young kid, who was a type 1 diabetic, and he was able to build a link from his computer, and he lived near where I was staying. And by the end of the day, I was back in business, and then until it stopped working about 3 months ago, after another year. I didn't realize it just stopped working after a year. But and then I had to take shots, and I thought, what? I can't, But I'll tell you, I was grateful I had those syringes.
Yeah, I want to go back to the summer camp. I'm going off topic here, but one thing that the counselors at our summer camp and the doctor there, Dr. Earl Hurst, who was on before you, he and I had the same doctor when we were younger, Dr. Phillips. And Dr. Phillips at our summer camp, any kids who came to camp who were not given their own injections, by the time they left camp 2 weeks, Dr. Phillips made sure everybody was independent, was able to take care of their own diabetes. So I just thought that was amazing.
Well, it was very empowering for me too. I realized I had, to be with everybody who was doing the same thing, because it was empowering, and you didn't feel so vulnerable and so, inept, which is how I felt before I went there.
I have can you tell me about Beyond Type 1, what they're all about, what you're doing with Beyond Type 1?
Well, I mean,
people are watching, don't know who they are.
Well, it's basically an online organization that offers services all over the world now. They've expanded all over the world, and it's a remarkable organization. And people communicate with each other. There's any questions you may have about type 1. It's a vast organization that can help you with any of your problems, and especially if you're isolated in some rural area. But as long as you have internet, you can just log on to Beyond Type 1, and there they are. It's a wonderful organization.
Okay. So today is Dr. Banting's birthday, for Dr. Frederick Banting. He discovered insulin in 1921 at the University of Toronto, Canada. But Dr. Banting actually discovered it at his home where he was living. He came up with the idea, and that was London, Ontario. Now, you were also born in London, Ontario. How cool is that?
It's really cool. And I actually sat on his bed
Wow.
when I went there to visit his house, and just sort of got very emotional thinking that he, apparently the story is that he had a dream, and he woke up and sat up and had this idea. And I just thought that's just an...
I'm sorry.
Okay. What's happening?
I had a book. The book Discovery of Insulin by Michael Bliss, and it talks all about Dr. Banting. I was looking for it.
Yes. Well, anyway, yes, it was. I feel very, and that's why the whole the gouging of insulin became so important to me. Aside from the fact that people were dying from rationing insulin, but that he had sold the patent for a penny so that no one would ever be without it. And so it's kind of unconscionable. Well, it's completely unconscionable what the drug companies have done, and they're still working on it. And there's this great documentary coming out called Pay or Die, which I have a slight involvement with. And they're finishing up the final filming, and it will be edited. And I highly recommend that it'll be on my Instagram in a couple of days more about it. But Pay or Die is the name of the film, and you must see it.
You just now talked about rationing insulin. I wrote a blog about that on our website. People today are dying from rationing insulin because they can't afford it. Yeah. You spoke to Congress about these crazy pricing of insulin, and insulin manufacturers went from $35 a bottle to $300 a bottle, and it's just crazy. And so you mentioned back then that years ago, they're still rationing insulin today. And that's one of my sort of emotional pet peeves about this. So I've been trying to do everything online to get signatures for petitions. And I can't imagine rationing insulin today, but they're doing it.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. And it's so wrong and so upsetting, and we all must do whatever we can to stop this. It's just unimaginable. I mean, when I think about growing up, if on my own, I was on my own since 16, and I could always afford to buy insulin. I mean, I was in Toronto, so obviously I was near, where it was discovered. But I've never. I mean, the idea that I would have to ration my insulin is unimaginable to me.
Yeah, I've worked in the Medicare health industry for 15 years, and their formularies show what drugs they cover. And one of the health plans I worked for was they were covering Humalog, Novolog, all these insulin, and they were $35 a bottle. And then all of a sudden, the prices went up, and these, not just my Medicare health plan I work for, but many of them took away those good insulins, Humalog, Novolog, Lantus, and they replaced them with MPH and regular into the formulary. And MPH and regular are insulins that you and I used from the 1970s.
Yes.
Right. And the way I said it to one of our pharmacy directors, I said, MPH and regular works, but it's like listening to music on an old scratchy album. I'd rather listen to music on an MP3 flavor player
of
that's crisp.
course.
It's I can imagine doing it, but people are buying MPH and regular today.
Yes,
It is
because
cheaper. It is cheaper, but diabetics should have the best. The
of course.
Lantus, Novolog, Humalog.
Yes, yes. Of course. It's just there's really no explanation other than greed, and that has been the downfall of civilization. So we've got to fight it, and we will, and we'll eventually get there. I believe
Yeah,
that.
and so it's great that you testify to Congress about getting the prices down. So I'm jumping all over the place here with questions.
That's okay.
So
I'm with you.
okay, so your career on stage and acting, I know those are long days. When you're at Broadway, stage plays, that's very physical, long hours. How did you manage your diabetes during that time?
I think with a wing and a prayer, I did the best I could, and I touch wood, I've had very few real serious incidents. But I mean, when I did Godspell, the Toronto production of Godspell, which was a very physical show, I was 20 something, 20 I think, 19, 20, 21, and there was on stage, there were all these props everywhere, and it was on a chain link fence, and we were on stage for the whole time. And there was a jar of honey where I sat most of the time, so I could, if I felt a low coming on, I could always just go swig some honey. And I mean, but that's not always the case. Most of the time, the last musical I did was Hello Dolly on Broadway. And my dresser, who was Jeannie, who was just like a godsend, she always had, she had glucose tablets, she had everything was in her bag around her. So I would come off and I'd say, I need some juice. Right there, she had it all ready for me. So it's the camaraderie and the support. Because when I was young, very young, I was always embarrassed to say I'm a type 1 diabetic, and now I tell everybody on the street, if they ask, I just say, I talk about it all the time, because it should be, there's nothing to be ashamed of, and people should know what to do. Yeah.
I have one final question for you, then we're going to go into a panel discussion.
Sure.
If there was a young mother standing in front of you, she's upset, she's crying, she doesn't know what to do because her 10-year-old child had just been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. She's standing in front of you. Victor, what do you say to her?
I say, get help. There's a whole community out there that will answer all your questions, that will be there whenever you need them. Beyond Type 1 is one of those organizations. JDRF is another. Just you're not alone. You can do it. And it takes you have to just retrain your brain to know that everything is possible and your child can live a normal life. I promise you.
Great. That's great. Well, thank you, Victor, for being with us.